Okay, we're going to pick up where we just had left off. And one thing I want to remind you is that in any industry, business models tend to be very similar. This is just the way companies organize themselves. They all seem to organize pretty much the same way. So you'll notice in slide 2 that what I've done is take some old medieval castles and just highlight the fact that all those castles are the same. They've got a drawbridge, they've got the keep up at the top where the important people stay, they've got the gun sights where they can shoot the arrows out of special holes in the side of the building. And all of them have a moat around them, and that's just kind of the way an industry operates, that everyone gets to be the same because what they're doing is trying to compete for the same piece of turf. That they've viewed the marketplace as being finite, and they are working to get their share of it. Now in slide 3 I show you that with blue ocean thinking, what it means is expanding the perimeter of the marketplace and finding potential customers who don't currently use that product category. So this is broadening the marketplace. And as I sometimes show it, what the companies do right now is they put their arms out around the entire marketplace as they view it, whereas a blue ocean strategist will say, hey, the market is much larger if we use some techniques to reach that, the rest of the potential market. So let's take a look at some blue ocean companies. This is on slide 4. And then on slide 5, I show some, specifically Starbucks, Walmart, Southwest, and a company called Yellowtail. Now, obviously we can, with this, what we're trying to do is see how these companies either reduced or eliminated things that the customer really didn't need, or raised or created new benefits that the customer might be willing to pay for. And our objective always is to do two things: minimize our cost and at the same time maximize the value that we're delivering. So with Starbucks, I have a little more trouble coming up with some of the places where they've cut costs, but it's quite clear where they've raised and created a new kind of coffee drinking experience. And in fact, I would suggest that what Starbucks does is not sell coffee, they sell the experience. And this has given them a way of charging much higher prices by giving additional value to their consumers. Walmart, on the other hand, has always gone on the basis of low prices every day. And while it might be difficult to see how they raise or create additional value, other than perhaps the fact that they are now located where they can get to about 95% of the American marketplace, what we have seen is they have reduced and reduced all of the costs associated with running a full line warehouse. They've got essentially plain pipe racks, keep it simple inside the store, and of course they also have eliminated a lot of the things that are appropriate or that you see at other stores to make it easier for people to shop. Southwest quite clearly does both reducing and eliminating things that customers don't want to pay for, and also raising and creating buyer benefits for their customers. So look at some of the specifics on that. Where they've reduced their costs and then been able to pass on that value to the customer is by not having assigned seating, because that slows down the boarding process. They've done it by eliminating meals. And this has not been an inconvenience for their customers because their flight time is generally about 500 miles, and that means it's probably 45 minutes to an hour, and certainly people can go that long without eating a meal, and in fact it would be very difficult to service them during that 1 hour time period when obviously 10 minutes is involved in takeoff and another 10 to 15 minutes is involved in landing, where the attendants aren't able to do service at either end of that continuum. They've also done things to raise and create value. They've raised the value substantially by using a point-to-point service. And this means that they generally have an origination point and fly to a destination point with no stops in between or without plane changeovers. This makes it much more convenient. It also means that they can fly more flights. They'll use all 737s to reach their marketplace. By virtue of going point to point, they can pretty well guarantee what time they're going to be taking off. Flights are always delayed as the day progresses because of mechanical issues, traffic control, and weather delays. If this affects Southwest and slows down their flight, well, that's okay, because all of their passengers that are going to be on that flight are there at the time it was originally scheduled to depart. Where other airlines are connecting flights and they bring their flights into a central location, for example, coming in from Northern California cities and down in San Diego into Los Angeles, they have to build in extra time on the ground to take into account that they will have weather delays, mechanical problems, and traffic control problems. And just because they've got so many flights coming in to concentrate their people into Los Angeles, in this case, for a long flight across country, that means that they have to spend more ground time. More ground time for the airline means that they're going to have higher costs because they have less airtime. You only make money when you're flying the plane. You don't make it when it's sitting on the ground. So this allows them to have more flights during the course of a day, and that means they can offer more options to their clients. So that raises the value of Southwest. They've also done some value creation for their customers. They don't require or even allow customers to buy tickets through travel agents. This makes it, frankly, I think, more convenient for the customer, where they can buy it from a kiosk or directly from Southwest. And it also means that you don't have to pay $8 or so to the travel agent. That is, Southwest doesn't have to pay that to the travel agent, and therefore they don't have to charge the customer. So Southwest focuses both on reducing costs, but also creating or raising the value of the service that they give. Might also add that they generally fly in and out of second-tier airports. So in the Los Angeles area, for example, they would be more likely or have more of their flights flying out of Burbank, John Wayne, Long Beach, Ontario, and even Palm Springs, rather than concentrating in Los Angeles, although today they have quite a few flights going out of LA. The advantage is that these are airports that are closer to downtown or closer to where people live, and that gives added value because it's easier to get to the plane, and there's less likely to be a big hassle trying to get through security. All of these things work together to make this a very good blue ocean company, and also makes it one that's hard for other companies to match, because their benefits are not just in a few areas. They're in a whole series of areas that the competition would have to copy in toto in order to be as effective as they are. Well, the last company I've got on that slide shows Yellowtail. And Yellowtail is an Australian wine manufacturer, and we're going to look at them specifically with regard to Blue Ocean as we proceed through this set of slides. So if we decided we wanted to look at coming up with a Blue Ocean strategy for our company, how would we go about looking at this? And you'll see this on slide 6, the invitation to ask that question: how do we begin to analyze the market? Going on to slide 7, you can see that what the authors of the book indicate is to use what they call a strategy canvas. And this is really a very simple X and Y type graph, where on the Y-axis we can plot the value of different characteristics of the product or service that we're offering as being of low, medium, or high value to the consumer. On the horizontal, we can list a series of factors of course with a descriptor. Here we just use the number factor 1, factor 2, and factor 3 that we realize are important. Now, what you'll see, what we need to do, of course, is to fill in the spaces where the name factor is, and as with the specific factor we think is important. And the way we will plot that is to take that factor, whichever one it is, and plot whether this is of low, medium, or high importance to the supplier, who in turn will be thinking about, do I perceive this as being something of high value to my customer? So if we go on to slide 8, and we're going to come back to this, this strategy canvas, but as we go on to slide 8, you'll see the proposition that this is a personal assessment. Each industry is unique, and we know that companies in an industry have very similar business models. We defined that previously. And as everyone gets to be more and more alike in a marketplace, what you end up with is convergence. And this means that as industries become more and more alike, the only thing that will differentiate them gets down to low price. And that's the place where everyone gets killed because nobody can make any money. They just have to keep dipping lower and lower on their prices. If we were looking at this from a blue ocean strategic positioning, what we would do is each person who examines an industry is going to see it through his or her point of view. And this means that as we would draw the strategy canvas, which is the tool that's suggested that we use here on this slide, you'll draw different conclusions because different people view things different ways. Moving on to slide 9, you get to select the characteristics that you believe are important for your industry analysis. And you set the weightings for how important you think each of those factors is. And the way you're going to determine this is you got to do some market research. You don't get it for free. And moving on to slide 10, then what we want to do is to use this with our ERRC grid, and that is eliminate, reduce, raise, and create. And so what we want to do is examine the product or service we want to offer and see, is there anything we could eliminate there that the customer really doesn't value or is not really willing to pay for. In fact, some customers may be so turned off they won't even buy our product because it has features or benefits that we're not really looking for. Also, try and reduce some of the things that are not of value to the customer. By the same token, we want to work to increase values by raising the standards on some of the things that people want but can't get, and create new value by coming up with new capabilities that the customer may not even have thought about, but certainly knows he can't get from existing products. So moving on to slide 11, what we're doing is looking at cost reduction, and then in slide 12 we'll see that we're looking at value increases. What does the industry spend money on that may have been taken for granted? Now, if you recall, in the last presentation I showed the example of the automobile, where there were about a half a dozen things that over time the manufacturers eliminated because they no longer enhance the value of the product or service. And one of the favorites for me is the idea of the vent wing on the side of the car. And as I indicated in that earlier presentation, or the earlier part of the presentation, the vent wing allowed you to have 460 air conditioning. You opened the vent, it rolled down your windows, and as you're driving 60 miles an hour, that was your air conditioning. But once air conditioning, the vent wing allowed you to blow, by adjusting it, you could blow air directly into your face along with the bugs. But once the air conditioning came along, there really was no need to have that vent wing. And so this was something that may have been taken for granted, and it took several years to eliminate that from the side of the car. And as you know today, there's only the side window. There's no division there with something for an extra vent wing. Sometimes you also want to look at products that got over-designed. What I show here is a very expensive Swiss Army knife. It's $3,100, and it has more stuff on there than you can even count. And that is something that you just increase the cost, and you're not going to get much in the way of payback because it's just plain too expensive. In slide 12, I talk about value increases, the things you can do to increase value. Sometimes customers have to do workarounds to use your product. The product that you've got may be good, but there's some things that the customer can't get. An example I think of is if you do any kind of home improvement work or construction work, you may have an electric drill that also substitutes as an electric screwdriver. And sometimes if you're doing some of those projects, you get into areas where you really can't see very well what you're doing. And the workaround that you do with that a lot of times is to get something like a miner's cap, where you have a small light that would be right at in the middle of your forehead, so you can turn that light on and see where to put the drill. Well, somebody in the drill business came up with the idea of putting the light directly on the drill. And that way you don't have to have that second device to wear. You can go directly to where you want to put your screw in, or drill the hole, and your light on the drill itself will show you exactly where you need to be. Sometimes what we want to do is to increase value by new sources of value for the buyer, who can help to create new demand and shift strategic pricing for the industry. This certainly has been true with the smartphone. While initially it was really designed to just help with sending text messages or making phone calls, the capability within that device really changed the ability to do a lot of strategic price improvement by offering all the different apps that are available on that. And this really can be a big deal when you've got a product or service like that. But in all cases, we want to follow the dictum that what we want to do is offer the minimum quality and benefits on our products that the customer is willing to pay for. So moving on to slide 13, you can see I have my same old medieval castles, but what we're trying to do is to develop a new unique marketing approach and strategic position, and at the same time try and expand market boundaries. That's the key, is moving into larger and larger markets that existing customers have a hard time seeing as a potential, because they are sufficiently different to not be part of their radar sample as they go into the market.